Will you join me in our call to worship? We are a justice-making, truth-seeking people. We share a reverence for the mystery of life. Come, let us worship together. Good morning, Birmingham Unitarian Church. Good morning. It is so good to be together again. Whether you are joining us here in the sanctuary, remotely via Zoom, or watching this later, it is good to connect with you. As a multi-platform church, it is important for us to build and continue to sustain a bridge between online and in-person participants. We call this greeting our virtual neighbors. Don't worry, you don't have to shake anybody's hand. We are going to wave, though. So first, we'll project the images of the people who are currently on Zoom up here on the screen. I'm going to ask you guys to turn on your cameras, please. See all your smiling faces. Good morning. Wow, there's actually people in there I don't even know. This is great. And now we're going to turn around and face the camera and give them a wave back. Good morning, everybody. Whenever and however we connect with BUC, we are building BUC. At home, on campus, in the world, every day, we are Birmingham Unitarian Church, and we are building the beloved community.
We kindle this chalice as we engage the crisp days of December, days of receiving gifts of family and community, days when many receive gifts of grace. and the sacred knowledge that it is more blessed to give than to receive.
Please rise in body and spirit to sing our first hymn this morning, number 100. I got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I got peace like a river in my soul. I got peace like a river. I got peace like a river. I got peace like a river in my soul. I got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I got joy like a fountain. Got your joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I got love like an ocean. I got love like an ocean. I got love like an ocean in my soul. I got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I got love like an ocean in my soul. Here we go. A 1, 2. I got pain like an arrow. I got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow in my soul. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow in my soul. I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops in my soul. I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops in my soul. I got strength like a mountain. I got strength like a mountain. I got strength like a mountain in my soul. I got strength like a mountain. I got strength like a mountain. I got strength like a mountain in my soul. I got strength like a mountain in my soul.
Today's worship service is titled The Problem of Hanukkah. I'm very pleased to welcome my friend, Rabbi Alana Alpert, as today's worship leader. She is the rabbi of Congregation Techaya, thank you, and also the founding executive director of Detroit Jews for Justice. Rabbi Alana has an interest at the intersection of religion and social justice and has a very impressive justice resume. She went to Hebrew College, which shared a campus with my divinity school, Andover Newton Theological School in Newton Center, Massachusetts. Although we did not entirely overlap, we have a few shared friends. And we met a few years ago working together on an interfaith child dedication for our shared friend, Reverend Julie Brock, who is the minister of First Unitarian Universalist Church of Detroit. So today is not Hanukkah. That celebration starts next week. But it turns out that Rabbi Alana is busy. I am very grateful to her for taking time during a busy season to share her perspective on Hanukkah. Her description of the service is as follows: the problem of Hanukkah, militarism, religious extremism, assimilation, and the need for a new metaphor. We're also joined in worship leadership today by Bridget Bechtold. Bridget will be BUC's sabbatical minister while I'm on sabbatical in January and February. I hope that you'll take a few moments after the service to get to know her. To help us get started in our thinking about Hanukkah, religious extremism and why people have such a hard time getting along, Shannon has a time for all ages for us.
Once upon a time, there was a village with a road that went straight through the center of town. One day, something strange happened. God walked down the road, and she was beautiful. She wore a long, flowing robe, and on top of her head was a wonderful hat. All the people stopped to stare at God as she walked by, and they kept staring until she disappeared into the distance. "Boy, God sure is beautiful," one man said, "and what a beautiful blue hat she had on." "Yes, God was beautiful," said a woman on the other side of the street, "but it wasn't a blue hat that she was wearing, it was a red hat." "You're wrong," said the man, "it was definitely a blue hat." "No, you are wrong," said the woman, "it was definitely a red hat." As the two argued, others joined in the dispute. Soon the whole village was arguing. All the people on one side of the road were certain that God was wearing a blue hat. All the people on the other side of the road were certain that God was wearing a red hat. People got angry and started screaming at each other. Finally, the people got so angry that they decided to build a wall and went straight through the center of town. From that point on, people on one side of the wall were enemies with the people who lived on the other side of the wall, and they never spoke to each other. On one side of the wall, people built a church where they worshiped a God who wore a blue hat. On the other side of the wall, people built a church where they worshiped a God that wore a red hat. Many years passed, and the people were still enemies. Then one day, God came walking back through the village. She was smiling and balancing on the top of the wall. She was smiling and balancing on top of the wall that the people had built many years ago. This time, she was wearing no hat at all. All the people ran to the wall and cried, "You must settle our argument." "Yes," said one man. "People on that side of the street say that when you walked through the village many years ago, you were wearing a blue hat. But we know better. We know that you were wearing a red hat. So tell us, God, what color was your hat?" God looked puzzled for a moment and began to scratch her head and thought. "I think I remember walking through this village many years ago," said God, "and on that day, I believe I was wearing my hat that is blue on one side and red on the other." Saying nothing more, God continued walking down the wall until she disappeared off into the distance. It was very quiet for a moment. Suddenly, there was the sound of one child laughing. Then another child started laughing, and another. Soon, the whole village was roaring with laughter. Everyone was laughing because they realized how foolish they had been. As the sound of laughter grew louder and louder, the wall began to shake and crumble until it finally came tumbling down. For many, many years after that day, the people told the story of God's hat and how laughter had torn down the wall between a divided and foolish people. At this time, all of our children and youth are welcome to head over to Hodis Hall and to participate in Candy Cane Sunday.
For you shall go out in joy, for you shall go out in joy, and come back in peace, and come back in peace. Blessed be, for you shall go out in joy, for you shall go out in joy,
The mission of Birmingham Unitarian Church is to be a free and welcoming religious community that encourages lives of integrity, learning, service, and joy. One way we live out this mission is by giving half of our weekly offering to a nonprofit organization that shares our values and addresses needs in one of these areas: environmental action, economic justice, civic engagement, and racial justice. We support a new organization each month. This month's plate collection recipient is Welcome Inn. Welcome Inn is run by South Oakland Citizens for the Homeless, and it is the only daytime shelter for unhoused people in Oakland County. It's in full operation from December to March, providing guests with a warm place to spend the day, hot lunches, clothing, social services, and health visits. Additionally, Welcome Inn is a low-barrier shelter, which means that anyone seeking shelter is accepted, without requirements such as background check and photo ID. Let there be an offering in support of our beloved community and organizations that build the world we dream about. This morning's offering will now be received with gratitude. Ushers, please come forward.
Shiny, happy people laughing. Shiny, happy people laughing. Me in the crowd. People, throw your love around. Love me, take it into town. Happy, put it in the ground where the flowers grow. Shiny, happy people holding shiny, happy people holding shiny, happy people laughing. Shiny, happy people laughing. Everyone around. Love them. Put it in your hands. Take it. There's no time to cry. Happy. Put it in your heart where tomorrow shines. Shiny, happy people holding shiny, happy people holding shiny, happy people laughing.
We are a church of open minds, loving hearts, and helping hands. With gratitude, we dedicate this offering to the good works of our congregation and dedicate ourselves to its service.
So usually on the first Sunday of the month, we have a short video to introduce the partner organization, and last week was our big music Sunday, and so I said, let's do it next week, which is this week, and then I forgot to tell Bridget. I have one or two things going on, so I am responsible for that. I'm so sorry. Taylor, can we go back and show that video about Welcome In so everybody knows a little more? Thank you. Thanks, Taylor. We've come to the time in our service that we set aside for centering in prayer. We begin with the sharing of joys and sorrows from our congregation. We'll start with a submission from Heidi Kapsakavathis. Heidi says, "To all those who find this holiday season a difficult time of year, may you be encouraged by the love of this community. May you find the courage to reach out in your time of sadness and loneliness." We also have a joy from Larry Larson. Larry says, "A major victory for the LGBTQ plus community was the passage of the Respect for Marriage Act on Thursday." He continues, "It's a victory for all who value equality too." And finally, I have a joy from the Beal household. Jesse Beal was recently named the director of the Spectrum Center at the University of Michigan, which is the country's oldest LGBTQ resource center. All this while being enrolled full-time in a PhD program at MSU and married to me, which I imagine must be exhausting. But we are very proud of them. Thank you. They're literally writing a paper right now, but I'll tell them that you clap. Thank you. Will you join me as we move forward into a spirit of prayer and centering? Spirit of love and life, mystery that is known by many names and no name at all. We gather in a time of year that is fast and slow and full of lights, and also it gets dark earlier, and sometimes we feel alone while we're surrounded by so many people. It's confusing and it's loud. During this time, may we find a stillness within ourselves. May we keep an anchor in this congregation and our community. May we be able to rise above the din of it all, to enjoy the beauty and the hope and the love and the festivities that are around us without losing track of the things that are tough, but not letting those tough things overcrowd. As we come to the time of celebrations from so many different religious traditions and the time of the solstice and the natural world, may we be moved into a deeper spirit of understanding and generosity. When we find something that we don't understand or something that chafes us, maybe take a moment to think, well, who might this be for? And how might I be of service to them? Through all of the seasons of our life, may we be moved to further compassion and inclusion, always seeking to find bridges, tear down walls. May it be so. Amen, and blessed be.
When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love.
Today's first reading is from patron saint of angry lesbians, Adrienne Rich. Adrienne Rich was a feminist Jewish lesbian poet who was most prolific in the 80s and 90s. This is from 1995. It is titled, "What Kind of Times Are These?" There is a place that stands between two stands of trees where the grass grows uphill and the old revolutionary road breaks off into shadows near a meeting house abandoned by the persecuted who disappeared into those shadows. I walked there picking mushrooms at the edge of dread, but don't be fooled, this isn't a Russian poem. This is not somewhere else, but here, our country, moving closer to its own truth and dread, its own ways of making people disappear. I won't tell you where this place is, the dark mesh of the woods meeting the unmarked strip of light, the ghost-ridden crossroads, leaf mold paradise. I know already who wants to buy it, sell it, make it disappear. And I won't tell you where it is, so why do I tell you anything? Because you still listen. Because in times like these, to have you listen at all, it's necessary to talk about trees.
This is the Haftorah for Chanukah, the supplemental reading from the book of Zechariah. Shout for joy, fair Zion, for lo, I come, and I will dwell in your midst, declares the Lord. In that day, many nations will attach themselves to the Lord and become God's people, and God will dwell in your midst. Then you will know that I was sent to you by the Lord of hosts. The Lord will take Judah to God's self as God's portion in the Holy Land, and God will choose Jerusalem once more. Be silent, all flesh, before the Lord, for God is roused from God's holy habitation. God further showed me Joshua, the high priest, standing before the angel of the Lord, and the accuser standing at his right to accuse him. But the angel of the Lord said to the accuser, "The Lord rebuke you, O accuser. May the Lord who has chosen Jerusalem rebuke you. For this is a brand plucked from the fire." Now Joshua was clothed in filthy garments when he stood before the angel. The latter spoke up and said to his attendants, "Take the filthy garments off him." And he said to him, "See, I have removed your guilt from you, and you shall be clothed in priestly robes." Then he gave the order, "Let a pure diadem be placed on his head." And they placed the pure diadem on his head and clothed him in priestly garments as the angel of the Lord stood by. And the angel of the Lord charged Joshua as follows, "Thus said the Lord of hosts, if you walk in my paths and keep my charge, you in turn will rule my house and guard my courts. And I will permit you to move about among these attendants. Hearken well, O high priest Joshua, you and your fellow priests sitting before you. For those men are a sign that I am going to bring my servant the branch. For mark well this stone which I place before Joshua, a single stone with 7 eyes. I will execute its engraving, declares the Lord of hosts, and I will remove that country's guilt in a single day. In that day, declares the Lord of hosts, you will be inviting each other to the shade of vines and fig trees. The angel who talked with me came back and woke me as a man is wakened from sleep. He said to me, "What do you see?" And I answered, "I see a lampstand all of gold, with a bowl above it. The lamps on it are 7 in number, and the lamps above it have 7 pipes, and by it are 2 olive trees, one on the right of the bowl and one on its left." I in turn asked the angel who talked with me, "What do these things mean, my Lord?" "Do you not know what these things mean?" asked the angel who talked with me. And I said, "No, my Lord." Then he explained to me as follows, "This is the word of the Lord to Zerubbabel, not by might, not by power, but by my spirit, said the Lord of hosts. Whoever you are, O great mountain in the path of Zerubbabel, turn into level ground, for he shall produce that excellent stone. It shall be greeted with shouts of beautiful, beautiful. It's always hard for me to remember not to say Shabbat Shalom. That's what I always, Shabbat Shalom. I mean, is this the Sabbath for folks here? So, great, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Actually, I remember as a young person being called up to we call this the bima, the raised platform, to maybe give a blessing or a gift to the B'nai Mitzvah student. And it wasn't Shabbat. It was a holiday of some kind. And, and I offered the blessing, and I said, Shabbat Shalom. And then the rabbi said, Shabbat Shalom, Alana, really making fun of me, and I'm not sure I ever quite got over it. So thank you for that, Rabbi Feinstein. So I will say Shabbat Shalom every day until the day I die. Okay, so my Chanukah. What is Chanukah? So this is a quote from the Talmud. The rabbis really, they're like, what is this thing? What is Hanukkah? And that is a question that continues to echo, because Hanukkah is a holiday whose evolution we can really trace through the generations. At its most basic, right? There was an oppressive regime, and the Jews revolted. The oppressive regime, that disallowed Jewish practice, and some Jews decided to assimilate, and others, the Maccabees and their followers, fought back, and oddly they won. Strangely, and they had kind of a sovereign Jewish polity for some short amount of time. So it's a military victory, right? That's in the book of Maccabees. That's the story that is told, and that's the foundation upon which Chanukah is built. And you're waiting for me to tell the other story about Hanukkah, but I'm not going to tell it quite yet. I love Hanukkah. Hanukkah invites me to shift into a new kind of winter being, right? To slow down, to rest more, to seek illumination and warmth, while appreciating the gifts of the darkness, right? The longer nights. Tradition teaches that we don't require any labor of the Hanukkah candles. We have this special additional candle to light the rest of them. They don't light each other, right? They have a special helper, the shamash. And we don't use their light to see by. Okay? You're not allowed to sit and read by the light of the candles. We just appreciate them, the light for its own sake. So I love Hanukkah, but I have at least two really big problems with Hanukkah. I find the metaphors of light and darkness to be really powerful for talking about matters of spirit and inner life. And I should say that song gave me chills. Thank you so much. That was so beautiful. I mean, everything that you guys did. So the metaphor is so powerful. It's so powerful. I love kindling tiny flames, light and warmth and fire, and sitting in the peaceful dark to watch them burn. But those metaphors have become racialized in the West, right? And religious language has given authority to the association of light with good and dark with bad, right? Light with hope and innocence, and dark with evil and trouble, right? That which we want to banish. And that's one of the Hanukkah songs we sing. We sing, Banu choshech legarish. We have come here to banish the dark. Especially in English, in which the words light and dark refer to both illumination and to color. their associations get mapped onto skin color, right? So the way we talk about Hanukkah and the songs we sing, there's a problem that needs attention. And I think Hanukkah is not the only holiday that struggles with that problem. It's such a laden metaphor. Right. My other problem with Hanukkah is the commercialization, kind of assimilation tangle, the way that Hanukkah has taken on significance because of its proximity to Christmas, and the way it has become associated with this frenzy of consumer culture. And of course, I know those things are different. Christmas is, of course, not inherently consumerist. So what do we do in light of all of those things? How do we celebrate Hanukkah? So the rabbis in the Talmud crack open the door for us by famously asking, "My Hanukkah?" What is Hanukkah? And in that question, they hint at the evolution of this holiday. Because the way that we have answered that question has changed over time. So I named a few of my problems with Hanukkah. The rabbis have another problem with Hanukkah, which is it's the militariness, it's the glorification, right, of violence, of war. That's like, they're not into that. The rabbis are like, they like books, you know? So in the Talmud, they record this new story that has a completely different emphasis. And this might be the story that is more familiar about Hanukkah. So when the rebels made it back to the temple in Jerusalem, they wanted to light the menorah to re-sanctify. That's what Hanukkah means. It means rededication. To rededicate the temple which had been defiled, right? But the story goes that the rabbis tell there was not enough oil for the menorah to stay lit long enough for them to get more oil. But miraculously, this cruise of oil that should have only lasted one day lasted 8, right? That was the miracle. And that's their way. Well, maybe it's, we might have time for a question. I'd love to hear from folks. What changes, right? I mean, maybe it's obvious, but I'd love to hear some different thoughts about like what changes when we tell the story as one of military victory versus one of the light lasting 8 days. Just one or two thoughts. Anybody? We have a mic. Oh, great.
Okay. Will you repeat your question, please, Rabbi Alada?
Yes. So what changes when we tell the story of Hanukkah as one of military victory versus one of the light lasting for 8 days?
Okay.
The impacts of that, what could they be?
To me, it's the difference between a story of violence and of people against each other, where the other story is about rest and communion and longevity.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. Anyone else? Other framing?
I'll take a shot at it.
Great.
Yeah, I would say, to me, it kind of sounds like the difference between a story that's about power over versus a story about abundance.
Beautiful.
Take that.
Yeah. Yeah, great.
Anybody else? If you're whispering, I'm going to hand you the mic. Anybody else? Y'all keep saying, please bring us other religious leaders. Come on.
I know.
Nobody?
It's like we
All
get,
right, Annis.
we lose our rabbi card if we don't ask a question. So I don't know.
Well, I'm in a bit of puzzlement because I understand the Maccabee story that
Yeah.
the victory would be God helping the Jewish people so it's still a military God. The oil story is God still restoring them to their rightful place. So I have a little trouble separating the military from the spiritual,
Interesting.
particularly in Jewish history where God acts on behalf of the people.
Right. Right. Certainly, I think, and I'd have to look back again at Maccabees to see, but I think the other problem that the rabbis have with the story is that it does they're trying to recenter God in a certain way, right? Because the miracle, like the military, it's not like the story of Joshua and God kept the sun up or whatever, right? Like it's like you could argue that the Maccabees just beat the Greeks. It would be hard to argue that, but I think it's not as clear of a divine kind of intervention as the story, as the miracle. And I know that that's also an issue with Purim. The rabbis kind of get into trouble with that because there's God is literally not mentioned in the book of Esther. So that's interesting. Thank you for that. Okay. Any more thoughts before we keep going? Great. Thank you. The other piece that I think is probably important to say is that the problem with the Maccabees wasn't just that they, tried to solve their problems, militarily. But the problem was that they actually were violent towards other Jews, right? So that's the thing that my partner always reminds me every time we get to Hanukkah. He's like, the Maccabees are kind of like the Taliban, they just, and we're all like, yay, the Maccabees. And it's they would have killed us for sure. I would not be considered a kosher Jew according to the Maccabees. So I'm just adding problems, so many problems to Hanukkah. Okay. So, and one of the reasons why I wanted to read the Haftorah that I read just a few moments ago was because this was another strategy that the rabbis did to undermine the dominant narrative of Hanukkah. So Haftorah is like a supplemental reading for Shabbat. So basically every Shabbat we read, there's a reading from one of the 5 books of Moses, right? And it goes in order, right? Every September, every fall it's Genesis, and then and there's then we have the whole prophets and the writings, right? Books. So if we say, it's so hard with the masks. I know it's so important. I love masks, very important. But I'm like, are you with me? Okay, you're with me? Okay, this is a complicated. Okay, so there's the 5 books, and then there's the prophets and the writings. And so the process of reading the first 5 books is very clear and orderly. The Haftorah, which basically pairs a reading from, it might seem kind of random, right? From the prophets, from the writings with the Torah. It's the same every year, right? We always know, okay, this Shabbat, when we read this section of Genesis, we're reading this section of the prophets. Does that make sense? So for Hanukkah, every year we read this piece from Zechariah, which says, not by might, not by power, but by spirit alone. That's their other move, is literally to put in there that we read the contradicting, itself. Really, they were so feisty. Really chutzpah, So So there's this shift away from the celebration of military power to a celebration of spirit and resilience and faith, abundance. I love that language. Thank you. The invitation from the rabbis is to continue to add to the story in ways that shift its emphasis, right? So turning back to the first two problems that I mentioned, when people say happy holidays or talk about the holiday season, I want to say it's not my holiday season. I want to say Hanukkah is a minor holiday. And the gift giving, do folks know that? It's really a minor holiday. It's like, really wouldn't have been a big deal in some other geopolitical context. And gift giving isn't really a part of it. But in truth, that version of Hanukkah is as real as the others, right? Because there is no essential Hanukkah. So the question is, how can we embrace its evolution and find ways to make it actually reflect our values? So a few years ago, I was complaining about assimilation to a friend, feeling sorrow about loss of Jewish culture and knowledge. And he said, if it weren't for assimilation, you and I and our queer comrades would never get to be rabbis. Assimilation has its gifts, such as my ability to come be here this morning and share this teaching with all of you and learn from all of you. And knowing that the metaphor of light and dark is racialized, we have to acknowledge and name it. I'm not sure we can genuinely decouple the association of light and dark with skin color, right? But we must interrupt the association of light with good and dark with evil. We can do that by highlighting some of the negative connotations of light, right? So pale, or what if there's, sometimes there's too much light, right? Sometimes too much light makes it hard to see, right? We can also highlight the gifts of the dark. It's a year-round activity, but I've made a really important part of my Hanukkah practice to sit in the dark and give thanks for its gifts. And I want to invite you all into that practice, to this season. Spend time with the dark and give thanks for those gifts. Thank you again so much for inviting me this morning. Such a blessing. Shabbat shalom.
And now I invite you to light that inner spark and join and sing our last hymn, This Little Light of Mine.
Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
into this world as a beacon of hope and joy. Go in love, go in peace. Now that our worship has ended, our service begins. May it be so. Amen, and blessed be.